My name is Amy Bond, founder of Pole and Dance Studios. You are listening to Up the Pole podcast, where I interview studio owners to discuss all things building a pole dance studio business. Thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoy the show. All right, guys, welcome to our next episode of Up the Pole podcast. I am here with the one and only Dan Rosen. Dan is responsible for the PoleLOL Instagram page that has brought me personally endless hours of just insane cackling, with over 100,000 followers on that page too. Dan is also the owner of an online pole conditioning platform called Pole Destroyers, and recently sold his studio and traveling the world as an international polebrity, as we call it in this biz. Dan, welcome. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. It's so nice to be able to chat to people who I feel like we know each other. It's like, have we ever actually met face to face?
I don't think we have.
We?
I took one class on your Pole Destroyers website during COVID and got to see you in the wild. Yeah, we've never actually said hi. So, and I feel like I know you as well through all of the things that you do. And, since you were a studio owner and I am a studio owner, I feel like we have that trauma bond.
Yeah, well, I just want to say, actually, before we go into talking about that, actually, my studio was not on the same sort of level. Mine was a tiny little studio. It's just 6 poles, small little studio. But do you know what? It taught me so much. Just any business is going to teach you so much about life.
God, totally.
When you said about the trauma bonding, oh my God, when you get to know other studio owners as well, who you get on with, you literally do trauma bond with each other. I'm so glad I don't have to do with that anymore. Thank God.
You already were traveling and teaching, so it's not like it's new to you to travel and teach. Most people who own studios do that, but I am curious what new challenges are presented that maybe are unexpected. Being a traveling polebrity is so many people's dreams. And I remember the one year that I got really into it a few years ago. I was shocked at how exhausted I was all the time. I was like, no, actually, I don't want to do this anymore.
I remember when I first started doing it, I remember just thinking, oh my God, I'm living the dream. This is amazing. Yeah. And it is amazing. Mm-hmm. And I don't want it to come across as ungrateful when I say this, but It is exhausting. The best part for me is the teaching the classes. When I'm teaching the classes, I'm living my best life. But then as soon as it's finished, I'm like, oh God, I've got to go to the airport now. I've got to do all of that crap and then flight delays, and it's hard.
I feel like pole dance studios are always in the least obvious places.
Yeah, it's weird actually. I feel like pole studios generally, unless you're really lucky. I think I remember going to Body and Pole once in New York and thinking, wow, this is a good location. But then you're gonna pay through the arse for a space like that. That's the thing. It's that in the UK, if you want a space like that, oh my God, I couldn't even tell you how unaffordable it would be. Since I sold my studio, I've noticed that I try to be really transparent with people about numbers, and I never used to do that when I owned a studio because I just didn't want to talk about it. I felt like it was inappropriate. And then when I left, I was like, you know what? Someone needs to talk about it because I think people are under this crazy illusion that pole studios make good money. So, for example, actually in Germany, I hardly ever meet studio owners who do studio ownership full time because they could not afford to. It's impossible, especially in Germany because the tax is so high. In the UK, for example, people will come into the studio and they'll look at the amount of people in the room within that hour, and they will do the math. They'll be like, okay, well, we're all paying, let's call it £10 each. There's 10 people here, that's £100. Fuck, that's amazing. But when you then think, well, actually, it's not amazing when you consider I only have 2 classes like that per day. So then when you actually do the maths and you then work out what the costs are, it's not as great as it sounds like it's going to be. No. And it's gotten worse over the years. Rents have gone up, but we can't put the prices up of the classes here and stuff. And I feel for studios here. There's a lot of studios that are suffering because of it. And they're just literally having to pay themselves less and less and less because they can't put the price of the classes up because people won't pay it.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I do think that studio owners across the board should increase their prices. Often students aren't paying for a fitness class. They're paying for the community. They're paying for the artistry. It's like so much more than a fitness class or like a Orange Theory class.
I feel
Hmm.
like from a business point of view, yeah, I agree with you. You just sort of think, well, why don't businesses just charge more? And then it's
Hmm.
like, well, it would mean all of them would have to. And the problem is that,
Yeah.
and this is not me being shady either, not all studio owners are business people. They're not. Like
Yeah,
a lot of
totally.
them do it
Hmm.
through passion. And the problem with
Yeah.
that is they're the type of people that don't want to put the prices up. They're like, oh, my
Hmm.
students can't afford it. It's like, yeah, but babe, you've got to be able to live. And I find that
Yeah.
so frustrating from a
Yeah.
point of view of someone who's like, well, I deserve to live well because I work really
Yeah.
fucking hard. So,
Exactly.
but we have this like struggling artist mentality within the industry where people are like, oh,
Hmm.
I don't want to put the price up because my students, they won't afford it. I'm like, they will afford it because,
Yep.
like you said, it's not just a fitness class for them, it's a
No.
community.
I started my studios after there was a big windfall when my ex-husband's company that he worked at got acquired by Microsoft. We got a ton of cash. And so I was able to afford to open a studio and then not worry about getting paid. And so I could support the business being built and put all of the profit from the first couple of years into the second studio and then not take a paycheck. I'm almost 10 years into building these businesses, and I've never taken a dollar out of my businesses. And in fact, put quite a bit in over the COVID years. And I think a lot of people assume that I'm just generous, like I'm a better studio owner and more generous, but it's actually that I can just afford to not pay myself. Like if this was my business and relied on me putting food on the table, like it would be run totally differently. Um
Right.
and I wouldn't have as much time to like fail before I succeeded. And I think that's the thing about small businesses too, is it takes years to build up a student base and a dedicated following and the word of mouth to accelerate. So that makes it hard.
But do you ever worry about it's down the line when you're like, okay, well, I need to make money from this now? And then you might have to sort of change the behaviors that you have as a business owner. Do you ever worry that the students will be like, bitch, you
Mm.
used to let me, God no, train for free all the time. Why are you charging me now? Do you know what I mean? Do you ever worry about stuff like that?
Well, I've never charged a low price. Like my studios have always been the most expensive studio in town. And I feel because of the quality of the instruction and the quality of the spaces and the way that we build these spaces, I'm not doing the thing that I think a lot of studio owners do when they're not relying on their business to put food on the table, which is they charge, like the $10 rate. Our drop in price is $44. And to be honest, I'm really proud of that because I believe that the service we provide is worth that. So anyway, like I really worked hard not to fall into that. And I think one of the biggest lies that people, but really like artists and especially women artists tell themselves is like, well, it's a labor of love. I think labor of love is code for like fast track to burnout. And and I wish we were having more of these conversations as studio owners, because I think people get really surprised when they get burnt out and they haven't paid themselves in 2 years.
I think the difficulty is when you build a community and a business based on it being a labor of love and you
Mhm.
don't set the precedent at the beginning that you're going to charge what it's worth,
Yep.
the issue then becomes that the clientele that you've built have
Mhm.
been used to a certain behavior and a certain
Yep.
way of you running your business. So when you eventually get to the point where you're like, I actually can't run it like this anymore, then they
Mhm.
start to question the value of whether you're worth paying more for it. And I mean, it's difficult because then you could go into the whole like, studio owners that become really friendly with their students or their instructors and stuff like this. Like, I learned
Mhm.
a lot over the years. And I just realized that the people and the studios that do the best are the studio owners that keep themselves as studio owners and keep themselves to themselves. And
Mhm.
just they don't let anyone get too close to the point where they feel like they can overstep boundaries. I mean, well, it's kind of totally going off track, but it is kind of related. But you know how
No,
many
this is a
studios are
really
like, oh,
important topic.
like my friend just set up a studio against me, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, why were
No.
you friends with your instructor anyway? Like they are working for you. Like, why were you giving them preferential treatment, and then the other instructors feel like they're being left out because they're not your bestie, you know? So it's just like, I just realized over time, if someone works for me, you work for me. That's it.
Mm.
Friendships and businesses together, it's
Yeah.
impossible to manage. You just can't make it work.
Okay, so I actually feel very differently about this,
Okay.
and it has bit me in the ass quite a few times. But my feeling is, I built this business because I love pole dancing, not because I thought I was going to make a ton of money at it. Though I do expect to make money at it. Like, let's be clear, I aim for a 15% profit margin. My feeling is, if pole dancers are my people, and why would I build a community just to not be part of my people?
Yeah, sorry, maybe I explained that wrong. I don't mean like don't be like still be friendly. Like I'm not saying
Yeah,
like don't talk to them, but you know I've done it, and I say it because I've definitely done it. I've allowed people to get too close to the point where they
yeah,
feel like if they wanted to go and train, and I asked them for money
hmm
for studio hire, they'd be like, "Oh, like why? Like we're friends." I've got a friend who I train with, and I'm always
hmm
offering her money for studio hire because I know what it's like.
yeah,
You know, the
totally.
electricity costs money. So if those
It
lights are
does.
on, she's got to pay it somehow, right?
Hmm.
So I'm really, really conscious of stuff like that, but not everyone is. So I just feel like it's you got to have like the presence, you've got to have the
Hmm.
friendliness with everyone, but you don't want someone
Yeah,
to feel like they could just call you in the middle of the night and be like, "Hey, I need your help." Do you know what I mean? I
yeah.
don't want that type of relationship because I feel like that's where the boundary is crossed.
I also like kind of feng shui my digital life. So if like an instructor messages me on Instagram, I say, please don't message me here. Please message me on Slack. And I think that can feel rude to some people, but it's how I'm able to like separate the parts of my relationship with people who I may employ, but also enjoy training with.
Well, you're probably going to think I'm absolutely crazy. I don't know if I've even
Noah,
talked about this publicly
I want
before,
to hear it.
but when I had my studio and I didn't have all my other businesses, I started with an admin assistant, right, who helped me. And then
Hmm.
during COVID, I let her go because I just couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
She was just doing part time for me anyway. And then I just kept signing off the emails as her. And I remember I would actually be like, if students message me, I'd just be like, hey, like, I don't deal with that. Like, please just like drop an email to Joanne. She'll sort it for you. And then later that night, I would send an email as Joanne. And do you know why as well I did that? I know that sounds a bit psychotic, but the reason
No,
I
I
did it
love
is
it.
because I found it really difficult to tell someone that I knew I was going to see in class the next day, no.
Yeah.
Like if they wanted a
Yeah.
refund, like you're not eligible for a refund
Yeah.
because then they're going to hold it against me
Oh,
as a
yeah,
person
totally.
when I'm teaching them. And I'm just like, that's a real issue. I think that also we suffer with as studio owners.
Yeah.
I was like, do you know what? How can I eliminate that? And I was like, why don't I just say that all of that is dealt with Joanne, which it was. But then after
Yeah.
COVID, I just carried on with it myself. So it just really helped keep
That's
that
brilliant.
barrier between me and the
Yeah.
students so that they didn't
Hmm.
resent me.
Yeah.
Yeah, weird.
I'm curious, before COVID to after COVID, how are you doing on like a margin basis in 2019 compared to after COVID, for instance?
It was the best time for me financially to the point
Mhm.
actually where I'd made a few mistakes financially, where I'd made so much money online because I didn't realize how much it was going to blow up.
Cool.
Um, it ended up, I had to pay so much tax because
Oh,
I'd not done it in the most tax efficient way.
So your online business did great during COVID, and
It did.
the physical studio before COVID, I assume, was doing really well because 2019 was kind of like the golden year.
I mean, it was doing good. 2019 was also probably the peak of my like traveling and stuff.
Gotcha.
So I noticed that the numbers had been affected by the fact that I wasn't in the country as much. But
Yeah.
that kind of happens, especially if you're a studio owner. Your students are used to having you. So then when they don't have you
Yeah.
anymore, they sometimes leave or whatever. So it was still a good time. But obviously COVID, we were closed. We had some studio classes which were online, which sort of ticked us over. But then when we came back, it was a struggle. Yeah, it was a real struggle. I think that's probably a contribution to why I sold in the end. And then
Yeah.
I've got an instructor who I already had in mind that I knew I always wanted to give it to. And I was like,
That's
listen, I'm
awesome.
always away. I was just like, I just don't have the time for this
Run
anymore.
it.
So I'm just going to
Do it.
sell it. So yeah,
It must have felt
yeah.
so, I really do think of my studios as my kids because they're, there's always something that comes up. I'm
Mm.
never like, I'm always a text message away from like, what's wrong? What's flooded? What's leaking? What's going on? And I imagine that when I think about someday selling my studios, I feel a lot of sadness, honestly. But I also feel like, oh my God, I'm going to be so free. It's like, the kids turned 18 and went to college. Like, that's how I imagine it feeling. But I also imagine there being something of an identity crisis. Maybe not for you, because Pole Destroyers was actually, it sounds like a bigger business than your actual studio.
Right. So
Mhm.
that's exactly it. Like, I would say it was sad for me when I sold it because it felt like the end of an era, and that was my
Yeah.
first ever business. So that business taught me
Aw.
a lot about how I conduct business now. And
Mhm.
so it was sad in that sense, but if I'm honest, near the end I felt like it was super stressful to be running it, that I was
Mhm.
just like kind of glad that I'd managed to, pass it on to someone that I really wanted to have it. I just knew that it'd be in the better hands of someone else. But it was sad. It was sad, but I don't regret it at all. I think I always had it as the backup. I think that's how I used to look at it. If everything else goes wrong, at least I've got the studio. Part of me was just a bit like, but
Yeah.
actually, like, you don't need it. You've got loads of
Yeah.
other stuff that you do. So I just was like, you just have to let it go. And I couldn't let it go for a long time. I should have sold it ages ago.
Yeah.
But I'm happy. It's going really good for Karen, who runs it now. She seems to be doing really well with it. So I'm really happy for her.
That's awesome. If you could go back and give your first year in business self some advice, what would it be?
Such a good question, actually. It would probably be about what we spoke earlier about the whole like, make
Okay.
sure you treat this as a professional business. Because when
Mhm.
I opened it, I started using that room as just a room for me to train for competitions. Then I
Yeah, of
started
course.
teaching privates. Then I started teaching group classes, and then those group classes grew, and then the studio ended up being like a permanent studio. So at the
Mhm.
time when I first started, it was just a bit of fun. It was like a space where I could go and train. And then obviously as the community grew, it did feel like a family vibe because it was such a small group of us.
Yeah,
And that just grew
totally.
and grew and grew and grew. And I think had I treated it as a business, it would have avoided a lot of drama later down the line, like having to fire people, having to,
Ugh, yeah.
have awkward conversations with people. It's fucking horrible.
With Pole Destroyers, you're doing a fully online business. I think I read in
Yeah.
an article that during COVID, one of your Pole Destroyers classes had 500 people in it. Is that accurate? 500
Yeah.
people in a
So,
conditioning
so
class?
Yeah, so just so that people are aware though, that was actually not like, I wish that was paid students. So that was when I was doing
Yeah,
it as
that would have been
free.
awesome.
I started the business like out of the goodness of my heart. So basically I was in a position where I was like, I'd gained loads of weight. I felt really weak. I wasn't training as much. I was just teaching. And I just said, like, does anyone want to condition every day with me
Mm,
for,
nice.
31 days? And we do it every January now as tradition. And
Wow.
like 10,000 people later, that Facebook group, like we were all doing this challenge together. And it
Wow.
just really built this sense of camaraderie. And we were like, oh, we're in this
Yeah.
together. Like, come on, we can do this. And I just really got into it. And by the end of the month, everyone was like, damn, what the hell are we going to do now? Like, we need to keep going. And I was like, oh, God, okay. And I was like, right, let's do February, but I'm just going to charge them like a little bit of money just to pay for it. And
Yeah.
so many people bought it. And I thought, there's a demand here for
Wow.
this.